Hey, I'm your storyteller. I'd love to know where you're watching from. You can tell me in the comments section. When you are ready, lean back, and let's dive into this week's horror stories. It all started with a text from my brother, Jake. "Hey, you free to talk?" Nothing about it seemed weird. I called him back like I normally would, but the second he answered, something felt off. The voice on the other end sounded like Jake. Same tone, same way of speaking, but there was something else there. A slight distortion, like a weird echo beneath his words. He brought up a conversation we'd had a few weeks ago, something private, something only he and I knew about. It should have reassured me. Instead, my stomach twisted into knots. That echo lingered in the background, barely noticeable, but enough to put me on edge. I told myself it was just a bad connection. I wanted to believe that. Then he laughed. It was quiet, subtle, almost like a chuckle under his breath. But it didn't sound right, like two voices overlapping, just slightly out of sync. "Jake?" I said slowly. "Yeah? Are you using speakerphone or something? Your voice sounds kinda weird." There was a pause. "What do you mean?" he said. I almost let it go, almost brushed it off. But something in me wouldn't drop it. "I don't know, there's this weird echo. You don't hear that?" "No. You're the only one hearing it." His voice dropped slightly on that last sentence, like he was speaking closer to the mic, or like something else was speaking with him. A shiver ran down my spine. "All right, well, I'll call you later," I muttered. "Okay, talk soon." I hung up. The second the call ended, I felt like I could breathe again. My apartment was silent except for the hum of my fridge. I let out a slow breath, shaking my head. It was nothing, just my brain playing tricks on me. Then my phone buzzed again. "Jake, missed call." I frowned. I had just hung up with him. Before I could call back, another notification popped up. Voicemail received. I opened it. Something about this felt wrong. I pressed play. At first, static, low and crackling, like an old radio struggling for signal. But then someone said, "Don't answer the phone." It was Jake's voice, but warped, desperate, almost like he was pleading. I yanked the phone away from my ear. What the hell was that? Then my screen lit up. Incoming call. Jake. I forced myself to answer, putting the phone to my ear. "Jake?" I said. All I got back was, "You shouldn't have answered." My stomach dropped. It wasn't his voice. It was close. Too close. But not quite right. Like someone trying to imitate him and failing just slightly. I hung up and immediately called Jake myself. The real Jake. He picked up on the second ring. "Yo, what's up?" His voice was normal. No distortion. No echo. I swallowed, my throat dry. "Did you just call me?" "No. Why?" "You just sent me a voicemail," I said. "Dude, I haven't even touched my phone." I slowly turned, looking around my apartment. Nothing felt different, but the air felt heavier somehow. "You good?" Jake asked. Yeah, I'm good," I said, even though I wasn't. I deleted the voicemail, blocked the number, tried to shake it off. But later that night, as I was lying in bed, my phone buzzed again. New voicemail. No missed call. No number. Just a single message waiting to be played. At first it was static again. Then, layered over the distortion, a voice that sounded almost like mine. "You can't block me." The voicemail ended. I stared at my phone. Who was doing this? Why were they doing this? I haven't had any strange voicemails or calls since, so I hope whoever it was has left me alone for good. But I doubt it. It was my turn to close up the office, a soulless cubicle maze tucked into the 5th floor of a downtown building. I didn't mind turning off the lights, locking up, and ensuring everything was in order before leaving. It was peaceful in a way. But tonight felt different. It was just me and the sounds of an empty building. I had stayed later than I intended, finishing up a report that was due first thing in the morning. The last of my coworkers had left hours ago, leaving me to enjoy the silence. Or so I thought. At around 10 p.m., as I was shutting down my computer, I heard something. It wasn't loud, just a faint sound drifting through the quiet office space. At first I thought it was my imagination or maybe some sound from the street outside. But the office windows were sealed tight, and I had grown accustomed to the muffled noises of the city. This was different. It came from inside the building. I paused my work to listen, but there was only silence. I shook my head and chalked it up to exhaustion. I grabbed my bag and started walking toward the main doors. But as I walked through the rows of empty cubicles, I heard it again. A whisper, soft and low, coming from somewhere above me. It was faint, almost like someone speaking just under their breath. My eyes instinctively looked at the ceiling vents. The office had a labyrinth of ducts that snaked through the building, pumping stale air into the cubicles. The whispers seemed to come from there. I laughed nervously. Maybe the wind outside were the cause of the noises in the vents. It wasn't uncommon for HVAC systems to groan or hiss when the temperature changed or a wind came through. But a whisper? It happened again. It wasn't mechanical. I was sure now it was a voice. "Hello?" I called, but no one replied. I should have left right then and there, but something kept me rooted in place. Against my better judgment, I found myself walking around the office looking at the vents. It seemed to be coming from the far corner of the office near the break room. I grew more nervous as I passed row after row of empty desks. When I reached the break room, I stopped. The vent above the coffee machine stared down at me. I stood there for a moment, straining to hear anything over the rush of blood in my ears. And then suddenly someone said, "Why are you still here?" The voice was clear now, soft, almost gentle, but unmistakably human. I staggered back, shocked. The voice had come from the vent, but there was no way anyone could be up there. The ducts were far too small for a person to crawl through. I grabbed a broom from the corner and used the handle to jab at the vent cover. It rattled slightly but didn't budge. "Who's up there?" I yelled. No response. Just silence. I waited a few seconds longer before turning to leave. My eyes were locked on the vent. But as I took a step toward away, the voice returned, louder. "Don't leave." I felt panic rising inside me. This time, the voice wasn't coming from the break room vent. It was coming from the vent behind me, the one over the cubicles I had just walked past. I spun around, gripping the broom tightly. My mind raced with explanations, each more absurd than the last. Maybe it was a prank, some late-night maintenance worker messing with me. But how would they know where I was? And how could they fit into the vents? I backed away slowly, keeping my eyes on the vents above me. Every few steps I would glance at the next vent, expecting to see or hear something. And then I heard it again, this time directly above me. "Stay here with me forever." I ran. I didn't care about shutting off the lights or locking the doors. My bag thumped against my back as I ran for the elevator. When the doors opened, I jumped inside and hammered the button for the ground floor. Just before the doors closed completely, I saw a person in the far end of the office. I didn't recognize them. As the elevator descended, I tried to convince myself that I was imagining things. Stress, lack of sleep, there had to be a rational explanation. But then, just as the elevator doors were about to open, I heard it again, faint but clear. "Come back." The voice echoed through the vents, following me all the way to the ground floor. When I ran out of the building and into the cool night air, I didn't stop running until I reached my car. I sped out of the parking lot without looking back. After that encounter, I no longer want to stay late. I didn't feel safe anymore. I'm now one of the first to leave when work is over. I tried to talk to one of my colleagues about it, but he thought I was joking with him. It was then I realized that it's best if I just don't talk about it at work. I don't want the others to think I'm crazy or end up losing my job. I was home alone that weekend. My parents had gone out of town for a few days and I was staying at my grandma's house. It wasn't the first time I'd been there, but it was the first time I was alone without any adults around. Grandma wasn't really much for leaving the house anymore, so I'd spend the weekends with her, helping her with whatever she needed. This time, though, she'd given me the house to myself. She was going to spend the weekend visiting some old friends, and I was just supposed to keep an eye on things. I'd heard a lot of stories about this house over the years. Stories about my family living there for generations, strange noises late at night, and the usual ghost stories that seem to follow old houses like this. But none of that bothered me. I liked the old house. It felt safe, even though it was creaky and way bigger than it needed to be for just one old lady. It had these long, narrow hallways, and you could hear every creak and groan of the wooden floors whenever you walked around. But there was one place in the house I'd always been told to avoid: the attic. Grandma would always say, "Don't go up there. It's just full of old junk and dust, too dark for anyone to bother with." Of course, that only made me more curious. Every time I stayed over, I'd look up at the attic door, just sitting there at the top of the stairs, always closed. I had asked Grandma once or twice if I could see what was up there, but she'd always refuse. I asked why she didn't go up there, and she would always say that she was too old and that she hadn't been up there in years. So when I was left alone in the house that weekend, I knew what I was going to do. I waited until Grandma left, made sure the house was quiet, and then went for it. The door to the attic was just at the top of the stairs. It was an old, creaky door, the kind that looked like it hadn't been touched in years. I grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen and walked over, the floorboards creaking under my feet as I climbed the stairs. The door was locked, but I figured it wouldn't hurt to try and open it. After all, I was just a kid being a little curious. To my surprise, the door opened without much effort. A wave of cold, musty air hit me as I stepped into the attic. It smelled like old wood and dust, kind of like an abandoned shed or an old barn. It wasn't much of a surprise, just piles of old furniture, some cardboard boxes with long-forgotten belongings, and random junk strewn about. But there was something exciting about it, like stepping into a room no one had entered in what seemed like decades. It was completely unexplored, just waiting for me to look through it. I spent the next hour up there, poking around, looking through boxes and finding old photos of people I didn't recognize. There were old books, some old wooden toys, and a collection of trinkets that seemed like they belonged to a different time. It wasn't spooky. It was actually kind of fun, even though it was way colder up there than the rest of the house. I didn't find anything too strange, but I loved the idea of it all being hidden away, like I was the only one who'd ever seen it. After a while, I decided to go back downstairs and watch TV, but the whole time I was there, I kept thinking about the attic. It felt like a place that had secrets, and I wanted to know more. But I promised myself I wouldn't go back up there that night. I'd wait until tomorrow. But later, after dinner, I found myself standing in front of the attic door again. I decided that it couldn't hurt to take one more look. Maybe I'd missed something, or maybe I just couldn't shake the feeling that there was something about the attic I hadn't figured out yet. I grabbed the flashlight again and opened the door. The cold air hit me once more, and this time the quiet was different. It felt like I was being watched. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, but I figured it was just my imagination. I stepped inside. The beam of my flashlight illuminated the familiar clutter. The same old furniture, the boxes, the forgotten toys. But then, I froze. There was someone standing in the middle of the room. At first, I thought it was just some shadow, maybe a coat or something that had fallen over. But no, it was a man. A thin, pale man, standing absolutely still in the center of the attic. He wasn't moving. He wasn't even making a sound. My heart skipped a beat. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. His skin was pale, almost gray, and his clothes were ragged, like they hadn't been washed in years. He was staring right at me, but there was no emotion on his face, just a cold, empty gaze. I stood there for what felt like forever, staring back at him, my legs frozen in place. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. The man didn't move, didn't say anything. He just stood there, watching me. His eyes never left mine. I slowly started to back away, still not sure if I was dreaming. My foot hit a box on the floor, and the loud noise broke the silence. That's when the man moved. He took one step toward me like he hadn't moved in a long time. I turned and ran out of the attic as fast as I could, slamming the door behind me. My heart was pounding with adrenaline. I didn't look back. I didn't dare. I locked the door to the attic. Shocked, I stood at the bottom of the stairs trying to catch my breath. I called my parents and told them that there was a man in the attic and that I'd locked him inside. They freaked out and told me to run outside and said they'd be on their way after they'd called the police. The police and my parents arrived almost at the same time. I went over to my parents, and after a few minutes, the police came out with a man in cuffs. He looked even creepier now in the light. They explained to us that he appeared to have been living up there for some time. They found a homemade bed, cans of food, and water, but they were going to make sure he never came back again. Grandma was just as shocked as the rest of us. She never suspected someone was living in her attic. Why would she? I'm just glad I was the one to discover him. I don't want to think about what would have happened if my grandma was the one that discovered him while she was alone. Exploring abandoned places was something I did for the thrill, for the mystery, and if I was being honest, for the escape. There was something about the quiet and decay of places left behind that gave me a sense of peace, like time had stopped just for me. But that calm wasn't what I felt that night in the old apartment complex on the edge of my town. The place was a notorious spot for urban explorers. Built in the 1970s, it had been abandoned for years after some legal dispute left it half renovated and forgotten. Nature had begun to reclaim the building. Vines were crawling up the cracked walls. I arrived a couple of hours before sunset. The outside was eerie enough, but the inside was something else entirely. The halls twisted and turned, and the floor plan was a confusing maze of empty apartments and dead ends. It was the kind of place where you could easily lose your sense of direction, especially in the dark. I wandered for a while, taking photos of broken furniture, peeling wallpaper, and graffiti that covered nearly every surface. The silence was heavy, interrupted only by the crunch of debris under my boots and the occasional sound of water dripping somewhere in the distance. As I moved deeper into the building, the narrow corridors seemed to stretch longer, and that was when I heard something. A faint sound behind me, a shuffle, like a footstep. I got goosebumps and it felt like my heart skipped a beat. I quickly turned, but there was nothing, just the same crumbling walls and scattered debris. "Hello?" I called out. No response. I shook my head, trying to laugh it off and convince myself that maybe it was an animal or just the building. I turned back and continued walking, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. A few minutes later, I heard it again. I spun around. That's when I saw him. A man, peeking around the corner of the hallway behind me. Just the half of his head and one shoulder visible. His face was partially hidden in shadow. The flashlight caught him, and he quickly ducked back behind the wall, disappearing from view. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't know what to do. I just stood there, staring at the spot where he'd been. My mind raced. Was he another explorer, a squatter, or something else entirely? "Hey," I called out. "I didn't mean to bother you. I'm leaving, okay?" No answer. I swallowed hard, my pulse pounding in my ears. I could feel the adrenaline. I wasn't about to stick around to find out who or what this guy was or wanted. I started walking back the way I'd come. Luckily, it was the other direction from where I saw the man. As I turned another corner, I glanced back, and there he was again, peeking around another corner, just watching me. The light hit him, and once again he vanished behind the wall. A cold chill ran down my spine. I told myself to keep calm, to keep moving, but every time I turned around, he was there. Always the same, just peeking, just watching. And every time he would duck out of sight the second the light touched him. I picked up my pace. I was starting to freak out as I tried to retrace my steps. The maze-like layout of the building wasn't helping. Every hallway looked the same, every turn leading to another dark corridor. And still, Every time I looked back, he was there. I didn't get a good look at his face, but from what I could see, there was no expression on it, just that eerie, blank stare as he watched me. I finally found the stairwell that led back to the ground floor. My body was trembling as I gripped the railing, practically leaping down the steps. The sound of my boots on the concrete echoed loudly, but I didn't care. I just wanted out. When I reached the front door, I flung it open and stepped outside. I didn't stop until I reached my car. I threw my stuff into the passenger seat, jumped in, and locked the doors. My hands were still shaking as I started the engine. As I pulled away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. For a split second, I thought I saw him standing in the doorway of the building, watching me leave. But when I looked again, he was gone. I never went back to that apartment complex. I don't know who or what that man was, and I don't want to know. All I know is that some places are better left alone. I had planned this hike for a while. It was a 3-hour drive to the national park, the name of which I won't disclose. I don't want anyone else experiencing what I went through. The forest stretched for miles, thick with towering pines and trails that seemed to lead nowhere. I'd been there once before, but had only scratched the surface. This time I planned to venture deeper, beyond the marked trails and into the untouched wilderness. I wanted to find a place where I could camp for the night. By mid-afternoon, I had already veered off the main trail, pushing through thick undergrowth and weaving between trees so dense they blocked out most of the sunlight. It was quiet, eerily so. Even the birds seemed to have abandoned this part of the forest. After a few hours of wandering, I found the perfect spot, a small clearing nestled in the heart of the woods. The grass was overgrown but soft, and the surrounding trees formed a natural barrier that made it feel hidden from the world. I set up my tent, gathered some firewood, and watched as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. By the time darkness settled in, I had a fire crackling and my gear spread out around me. I ate a simple dinner and leaned back against my pack, staring up at the stars. There wasn't a sound except for the occasional pop of the fire. It was peaceful. I turned my head to look around because I thought I heard something. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. I was staring into the darkness beyond the firelight when I noticed movement, just a shadow moving between the trees. I sat up, squinting into the gloom, trying to make out what it was. Then a man stepped into the clearing. He was standing just at the edge of the firelight, partially obscured by the shadows. I couldn't see his face, but I could tell he was tall with broad shoulders and a rigid posture. He wasn't holding a flashlight or any camping gear. He didn't even look like a hiker. He was just standing there, watching me. "Hello?" I called out nervously. He didn't respond. I tried again, louder this time. "Hey, are you okay? Do you need help?" Still nothing. The fire crackled, and for a moment I thought I saw him take a step closer, just enough for the light to catch his face. But his face, his expression, it wasn't right. I felt my stomach drop. Something about him was wrong. I stood up. I was starting to fear for my own safety. "Look, I don't want any trouble," I said, trying to sound calm. "I'll pack up and leave if this is your spot." He didn't move. I reached for my flashlight, shining it toward him. The moment the beam hit him, he stepped back into the shadows, disappearing from view. The fire flickered and the clearing felt colder somehow. I grabbed my pack and started throwing my things together as quickly as I could. My hands were shaking, and every second felt like an eternity. I kept glancing up, scanning the tree line for any sign of movement, but he was gone. Or so I thought. As I turned to extinguish the fire, I caught a glimpse of him again, this time on the other side of the clearing, peering out from behind a tree. It was like he was playing some kind of game, circling me, staying just out of reach but always watching. I didn't bother with the fire. I slung my pack over my shoulder and bolted, heading back in the direction I thought I'd come from. The forest was completely dark now. Every few steps I glanced over my shoulder, and every time I saw him, always at the edge of the light, always watching, but I couldn't hear any footsteps from him. At this point, I had no idea if I was heading in the right direction, but I didn't care. I just needed to get away. Eventually, I saw the faint glow of the trailhead parking lot in the distance. Relief flooded over me, and I pushed myself harder, practically sprinting the last stretch of forest. When I reached my car, I didn't stop to catch my breath. I jumped in, locked the doors, and started the engine. I was still scared, but I didn't want to hang around there. As I turned onto the main road, I saw him again. He was standing at the edge of the forest. His eyes were reflecting the headlights. I didn't stop. I didn't even slow down. Something was clearly wrong with him, and some things didn't even make sense. How could he move so fast without me hearing him? What did he want? What would have happened if I stayed and ignored him? To this day, I don't know who he was. I reported it to the park rangers the next day, and they said they'd look into it. But since the national park was so big, they didn't think they'd be able to find him. And it turns out they never did. It was a silent night, and I'd been driving for hours. The road was empty, and I was the only one out here at this hour. I had just finished a long haul, and I was looking forward to getting to the next truck stop to rest for the night. I pulled my rig into the middle lane, cruising steadily through the quiet night. But then something caught my eye. Up ahead, I saw a figure standing in the middle of the road. At first, I thought it might have been a trick of the light, maybe a sign or some debris. But as I got closer, I realized it was a man. I slowed down. I could see he was standing still in the center of the road, with his back to me. I honked the horn, getting irritated at him for standing in the middle of the road. But there was no reaction from him. I slammed on the brakes, stopping just a few feet away from him. My heart began to race. This guy was just standing there, not moving. I called out, rolling down my window. "Hey, are you okay? What are you doing in the middle of the road?" He didn't respond. There was clearly something wrong with him. He was tall, thin, and wearing a dark coat, but his posture was off. His shoulders were hunched, and he wasn't turning around. He was just standing there. My instincts were telling me to drive away, but something about the situation was pulling me in. Maybe I was too tired. Maybe I was just trying to be helpful. I put on my hazards, got out of the truck, and approached him slowly. "Hey," I called again. "What's going on? Are you lost?" As I got closer, I noticed something even more unsettling. His neck was twisted, and his eyes, if you could even call them eyes, were just dark voids. There was no color, no life in them at all. I took a step back. Something clearly wasn't right here. Before I could even turn around to get back to my truck, the man snapped his head towards me. His eyes locked onto mine, and for a split second I swear I saw something move within them. I didn't wait to see what happened next. I turned and ran back to the truck, slamming the door shut and locking it. When I looked out through the windshield, I couldn't see him. I wasn't sure where he had gone. But I didn't stick around to look. For the rest of the drive, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still being watched. I kept checking the mirrors, but the road behind me was empty. Nothing followed. But I couldn't escape that feeling. I reached the next truck stop and pulled over. I got out of the truck, trying to shake off the tension in my body. But as I walked into the diner, I overheard a conversation between a couple of drivers. "Man, you ever been out on 65 after dark?" one of them asked. "Yeah, why?" the other replied. "People say there's a guy that shows up there sometimes," the first driver said. "Always in the middle of the road. They say if you stop for him, you're never seen again." The second driver laughed. "You're full of crap. You've been driving too long. It's just some urban legend." But the first driver's voice dropped lower. "No, I'm serious. They say the man doesn't have eyes, and if you see him, you've already crossed over." My blood ran cold. The man in the road, the figure with the dark, empty eyes. I had seen him. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face. I've since then driven that stretch of road a couple of times, but I haven't seen him since. If I ever do, I know I'm not stopping again. It was just another Saturday night, nothing unusual. I had been out with some friends, grabbed a few drinks, nothing crazy. We weren't looking for anything wild, just a chill night at a bar to wind down from the week. Around midnight, I decided to call it a night and ordered a rideshare home. The app said my driver, a guy named Kyle, was 5 minutes away in a black sedan. I waited outside the bar, scrolling through my phone. The city was alive, the streets buzzing with activity, people milling about as the lights from the bars spilled out onto the sidewalks. I wasn't thinking about much, honestly. I was exhausted, ready to just get home, shower, and crash. Then, a black car pulled up right in front of me. I didn't think much of it at first. The car was a typical rideshare sedan, black, a little sleek looking, nothing extraordinary. The driver rolled down his window, looked at me and said, "For Emma?" That was my name. I took a step forward, my hand already reaching for the door handle, but something made me pause. My gut twisted. It was the way he said it. Too smooth, too rehearsed. I shook it off as paranoia, but I didn't reach for the handle just yet. I glanced down at my phone. The app buzzed, showing that Kyle was arriving now. I frowned and looked at the car again. There was something off. No company sticker on the windshield, no matching license plate. My real ride was still a block away. I had been in enough ride shares to know the drill. This wasn't my car. I took a step back, my heart hammering in my chest. My eyes darted between the strange man's calm expression and the car that didn't match any of the details in the app. "Sorry, I think I got the wrong car," I said. The man didn't say anything. He just stared at me for a second, with a blank expression. Then, before I could process what was happening, his hand shot out through the window. He reached for the door like he was trying to yank it open before I could step away. It all happened too fast for me to react any differently. I turned on my heel and started walking quickly toward the bar entrance, but I wasn't sure what was worse, the fact that this man was trying to grab me, or the fact that I didn't know where to go. I didn't know who to trust. Just as I reached the door, my phone buzzed again. My real rideshare had arrived behind the black sedan. The car pulled up and I turned my head. The driver leaned out of the window. "Emma?" he asked. The fake driver's head snapped up immediately, his eyes locking with mine for a split second. His gaze was cold. It was like something clicked in his mind when he saw that I was about to get into the real car. His hand pulled back from the door, and he quickly shifted the car into drive, peeling out into the street, tires screeching as he sped off into the night. I watched him go. My hands were shaking as I climbed into my real driver's car. "What the hell was that about?" Kyle asked, his brow furrowing. "Some guy tried to, I don't know, kidnap me, I guess," I said, still barely able to process it. I was shaken, trying to hold it together, but the reality of what had just happened was sinking in fast. Kyle glanced in the rearview mirror, but the other car was long gone. He didn't seem to know what to say. "You okay?" he asked. He sounded concerned. I nodded, but I wasn't okay. That wasn't my ride. He wasn't supposed to be there. I don't know what the hell he wanted. It was stupid. I should have walked away faster, trusted my gut the second I saw something was wrong. But I didn't. I reported the incident to the app as soon as I got home. I gave them the make and model of the car, the color, the fact that there was no company sticker on the window. But all I got back was an automated message asking me to confirm the details. There was no follow-up, no real investigation. Weeks went by, and I tried to put it out of my mind. The whole thing felt like a nightmare. It was only when I was scrolling through local news one night that I saw something that made my blood run cold. Woman found unalived after entering wrong rideshare. I had to read the headline again to make sure I wasn't imagining it. My fingers trembled as I clicked the link. It was a news story about a woman who had been out at a bar alone just like me. She had gotten into a black sedan, thinking it was her ride. The details were chillingly familiar. Same age, same type of car, same situation. She was found hours later on the side of the highway. I'll spare you the details. The police were looking for the suspect. They had security footage, but it was grainy and blurry, a distant image of the black sedan. The license plates had been removed. I didn't even need to read the rest. I knew exactly what had happened to her. The same thing that almost happened to me. I don't know what would have happened if I had gotten into that car. I don't let myself think about it. I don't want to. But I know that man was looking for someone. And that night, I was almost her. I still think about it. Every time I get into a car that isn't mine, every time I see a black sedan on the road, there's a part of me that wonders if I was just lucky, if the fake driver got spooked when my real ride showed up. But there's another part of me that can't help but think that if I had gotten into that car, if I hadn't trusted my gut, I wouldn't be here right now. And it's the uncertainty that keeps me awake at night. That nagging feeling that there's a whole network of people out there, preying on people like me, looking for someone to disappear. Maybe I was just one of the lucky ones, but maybe next time I won't be. I try not to think about it too often, but I'll never be able to shake the feeling that one wrong turn, one moment of trusting the wrong person could be my last. I had a habit of staying up late, scrolling through random parts of the internet. It was the kind of behavior I'd been indulging in for years, jumping from one weird corner of the web to another. One night, while clicking through obscure forums and videos, I came across a thread that seemed too bizarre to ignore. The title was simple: Real Crime Live Streams. It wasn't the kind of thing I would typically click on, but something about it intrigued me. The user who posted the link was anonymous, the kind of account that had no profile picture, no posts other than this one. The thread had a few dozen replies, all of them equally vague, just people asking, "Is this real?" or "Have you seen this?" The link led to a simple web page with no branding, just a black background and a single stream. There was no information, no description, just the live feed. I was cautious, but something in my gut told me to keep watching. The feed showed an old, dilapidated house with dim lighting. The camera was shaky, but the image was clear enough. It didn't look like a typical found footage setup. This wasn't some low-budget horror movie scene. It felt real. Too real. I sat there for a few minutes trying to make sense of it. The room on the screen looked empty, but there was a faint noise, a creaking like someone moving upstairs. I could see shadows moving around, but no one appeared on camera. I was starting to second-guess myself, but then the feed shifted. The camera zoomed in on the hallway, and for a split second I saw a figure move out of frame. Finally, some movement, I thought. The stream had a strange, ominous quality to it. It wasn't like any true crime documentary I'd watched. It wasn't sensational or staged. It felt like I was watching something raw, something that I shouldn't be seeing. Then the camera stopped. The person behind the camera, whoever they were, had left the room, and now the hallway was all quiet. I almost clicked away, ready to close the tab, but something kept me watching. I had to know what was happening next. Then the feed shifted again. This time, the camera was inside a small bedroom. There was a man on the floor. His arms were stretched out. The whole scene felt wrong. It took me a few moments to process what I was seeing. The man on the floor was definitely dead. I could feel my stomach turn as I processed the reality of it. The whole stream felt like a documentary of someone's last moments, and here I was, an unwilling viewer. The footage kept rolling, and then I noticed something strange. There was a phone beside the dead man's body. It was lit up. On the screen, a live stream was open. I was still glued to the screen, my eyes fixed on the phone. I didn't want to believe it, but the name of the live stream was something familiar to me. The Real Crime Stream. This was no accident. This was no random video. It was an active feed of someone's final moments, an event in real time, captured for some kind of sick audience. I panicked. Should I call the cops? But I didn't know where this place was. The feed had no location information, no way to trace it. The phone buzzed. I stared at the screen, waiting for the next update. Then the camera shifted again. It moved slowly, as if the person holding the camera was deliberately trying to avoid making noise. I felt my pulse quicken. The camera focused on a door at the end of the hall. I thought I saw movement. Then, suddenly the camera swung back toward the floor. The man's body was now gone. I was frozen. My eyes were glued to the screen. The feed seemed to glitch for a moment, but the next thing I saw made my blood run cold. I saw someone standing just close enough to the camera frame that he was visible. I couldn't make out the details, but I could see the figure clearly enough. A man wearing dark clothes. He didn't move for a long time, just stood in place, staring at the camera. Then he finally stepped further into the frame. "You shouldn't have watched this," he said. The words felt directed at me. I instinctively reached to close the tab, but for some reason I didn't. "You've seen too much now," the man on the screen said. I recoiled when I saw him more clearly. It was as though the feed had suddenly sharpened. He wasn't just a random stranger. His face was familiar. It was someone I knew. I couldn't believe it, but there was no denying the connection. The man on the screen had been a student at my university. We'd never spoken, but we'd seen each other around. His name, Adam, came back to me in a rush. What was happening? Why was he there doing this? Before I could process any more, the feed flickered again, and a message appeared on the screen. "You're the next one." I quickly pulled my finger away from the mouse. I didn't even want to touch it. What was happening? Was this a sick joke? Was I the target of some kind of social experiment? But then, in the bottom corner of the screen, a new name appeared under the list of viewers. It was mine. My heart pounded. The list of viewers had been anonymous. It was just a string of usernames, numbers, and symbols. I hadn't entered anything. Yet somehow my name appeared at the bottom. The message shifted again. "You've watched enough. We're coming for you." I clicked off the page immediately, but the message didn't disappear. It was still in my browser history. I went into my settings to try and delete everything, but it was as if the site had locked me in. Every time I deleted it, the message would pop back up. For hours, I couldn't escape it. And then my phone buzzed. I checked it. It was a notification from the Real Crime stream. The message was short and to the point. "We know where you are." That was the last message I received from them. This happened only 2 weeks ago. I'm still terrified of what they might do. I tried calling the cops, but they said there wasn't much they could do since the people behind it hadn't done anything yet. And I, of course, didn't have any evidence of the live stream. I just hope he sees sense and leaves me alone. I had finally decided to treat myself with some vacation. I found a charming Airbnb nestled in the woods, far away from the hustle and bustle of city life. The photos showed a rustic cabin, complete with a cozy fireplace and a view of a serene lake. I imagined the things I could do. Long walks in the fresh air and evenings spent curled up with a good book. When I arrived, the sun was beginning to set, so the sky had this beautiful orange color. I parked my car and stepped out. As I walked toward the cabin, I noticed a strange feeling settle over me, the one you get when you feel you're being watched. I didn't think more of it at the time, but that was a huge mistake, as I was about to find out later. Inside, the cabin was just as beautiful as I had hoped. The interior was warm and inviting, filled with vintage furniture and soft lighting. I dropped my bags by the fireplace and took a moment to appreciate my surroundings. As I began to unpack, I heard a noise coming from the back of the cabin. It sounded like someone talking softly. "Hello?" I called out instinctively. As I expected, there was no response, so I figured it was just the house making noises. Dismissing my unease, I made myself a cup of tea and settled onto the couch with a book. Just as I began to lose myself in the pages, I heard the noise again. It was definitely a man's voice murmuring. It sounded like he was having a conversation outside the cabin. I sat my book down and stood up. I couldn't see anyone outside from the windows, but I decided to call out anyway. "Hello? Is someone there?" Still no answer. Maybe it was a neighbor. There were, after all, other cabins nearby, or maybe it was another guest. But the listing had mentioned the cabin was secluded, and I hadn't seen any other houses on my way in, so the neighbors weren't close. The talking had stopped, so I shook off the feeling and decided to ignore it. Later that evening, I was in the small kitchen getting ready to make some food. As I rummaged through the cabinets, I heard a loud knock on the front door. It made me jump. Who could it be? I cautiously approached the door, glancing through the peephole. Standing there was a man who looked like he was in his mid-30s. He seemed to be disheveled and out of breath. "Hey, miss," he said with a nervous smile on his face. "I'm so sorry to intrude. I think there's been a mix-up with the booking. I'm the host's friend. I was told I could stay here for the weekend." I hesitated, unsure of what to do. The listing had said no one else would be there. I replied with, I don't think," but he cut me off. "Please, I just need a place to crash for the night. I promise I won't be any trouble." I opened the door slightly, still very wary. "I'm not sure. Can you call the host?" I asked, but he shook his head. "No service out here. It's spotty. I swear I won't bother you. I just need somewhere to sleep." Against my better judgment, I let him in. As soon as he crossed the threshold, I felt a wave of unease come over me. There was something off about him and this whole situation. "I'll just take the couch," he said, plopping down without waiting for my response. "You can have the bedroom." I nodded, feeling trapped. I tried to relax, but every time I glanced at him, the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I went to the kitchen, attempting to distract myself with a snack while keeping an eye on him. He kept glancing at me. As the night wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I excused myself to the bathroom, hoping to collect my thoughts. As I splashed water on my face, I heard the soft murmur of a voice again, and that's when I realized that the voice I heard earlier had to have come from him. I peered through the crack of the door. He was standing in the hallway, staring at the family photos I brought. I felt panic inside me. Why was he looking at them? "I know you're in there watching me," he said. "I just want to talk." My body began to shake as I realized he wasn't who he said. He was someone far more evil, and who knows what he had in plans for me. I needed to get out. I quietly opened the bathroom window and climbed out. I prayed that he wouldn't hear me. My plan was to drive out of there as fast as possible, and luckily I always keep my keys in my pocket with my phone. I hit the ground as quietly as I could, and I sneaked towards my car, hoping he wouldn't notice me. Just as I reached the car and opened the door, I heard the cabin door swing open behind me. "Where do you think you're going?" he yelled. I got in my car and fumbled for my keys. Just as I started the engine, he hit my side window. He tried to break it with his fists. I was now in full panic mode. I put the car in drive and sped out of there. I drove away with the cabin disappearing in the rearview mirror, but the feeling of knowing that I almost died never left me. And the worst part is, the cops never found him. This happened almost 7 years ago. It left a scar on me and a deep memory that I'll never be able to forget. I had the night shift that week. The maternity ward was mostly calm, with the usual sounds of babies crying and nurses moving through the halls. I was just finishing my rounds when I heard a faint, desperate cry. It seemed far away at first, barely noticeable, but it grew louder as I walked down the hallway. It wasn't like the usual cries from the newborns. This one was softer and almost pleading. I followed the sound, tracing it down the long corridor that led to the isolation rooms, where patients recovering from difficult births were kept. The cry was louder now, but as I reached the door to one of the rooms, everything just fell silent. I stepped inside, looking around the room. It was empty. The crib in the corner was untouched and the bed was neatly made. No one was there. But the cry, I could still hear it, faint, as if it was coming from the walls themselves. I left the room and checked the others nearby. Each one was quiet, with no signs of movement. I walked back down the hall, trying to convince myself that it was just my imagination, that I'd heard something else. But the cry wasn't gone. It was still there, drifting in the air, pulling me back toward the room I'd just left. I went back and opened the door. The room was exactly as I had left it, but now the sound of the baby was clearer and more frantic. I walked in slowly, looking around. There was no one in the crib, no mother in the bed. The room was still, yet the cry echoed louder, like it was trapped somewhere in the walls. I called the front desk asking if there had been any issues or if another baby had been moved to this part of the ward, but they confirmed everything was in order. All the babies were accounted for. I checked the other rooms once more. I passed the empty hallways, the quiet corridors, all while the crying seemed to follow me, always distant, but never far enough away. When I returned to the room again, the crying stopped. It was as if the baby knew I was back. I stood in the doorway, unsure of what to do, but as soon as I took a step into the room, I heard a soft rustling behind me. I spun around, but no one was there. I checked the crib again. Empty. No baby. I stayed in the room, listening to the silence, but the sensation of being watched crept over me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. I looked down at the floor and noticed something strange. A baby blanket, twisted, lying near the crib. It wasn't there before. When I moved to pick it up, I saw something else. A single tear in the fabric. The moment I touched the blanket, I heard the crying again. The sound was close, felt like it was right next to me, but there was nothing there. I turned and looked around, but the room remained empty and still. I left quickly, without looking back, but the sound of the crying followed me, echoing in my ears. By the time I reached the nurse's station, it had faded, but I got a painful headache and started to feel dizzy. I went back to check the room later in the morning. The crib was still empty. The blanket was gone. No record of any baby had ever been admitted to that room. There were no notes, no mention of any patient in the files. I couldn't explain it, but I felt it, deep in my gut. The presence of something that didn't belong. Something that would never leave, or was trapped in that room. I've been a trucker for years, and I've driven through just about every kind of road condition you can imagine. But nothing could have prepared me for that night. It started like any other. A long haul through a desolate stretch of highway in the middle of nowhere. The kind of road where you can see nothing but darkness on either side for miles. It was late, past midnight. I'd been driving for hours, and I was starting to get a little tired. I'd seen a few signs of life along the way, a gas station here and there, but nothing that would have made me stop. I was aiming for the next truck stop where I could get some rest. I'd made this drive 100 times before, so I wasn't worried. I was just focused on the road ahead. But out of nowhere, something caught my eye in my rearview mirror. I saw a pair of headlights coming up fast behind me. At first, I thought it was another trucker, someone keeping pace with me. But as it got closer, I realized something was off. The truck seemed to be exactly like mine. Same make, same model, same color. It was like looking at my own truck driving right behind me. I chalked it up to a coincidence. I tried to shake it off, but as the truck continued to tail me, I couldn't ignore the growing sense of unease creeping over me. It didn't take long for the truck to get even closer. I glanced back at the rearview mirror again. It was so close, dangerously close, I could almost feel the pressure of it. I could see the headlights shining brightly in the mirror, right on my tail. It was as though whoever was driving that truck was matching my speed perfectly. I started to panic a little. I hit the gas, trying to put some distance between us, but the truck stayed right there, matching me every step of the way. No matter how fast I went, it was right behind me. I sped up even more. I looked at my side view mirror, and that's when I saw something that made me question reality. In the reflection, I saw someone in the driver's seat of the truck. It was me, but it wasn't. The man sitting behind the wheel of that truck looked exactly like me, down to the same clothes, the same face, the same posture. I could feel the sweat trickling down my neck. I couldn't look away from the mirror. I tried to tell myself it was just my imagination, that I was tired, that I was seeing things or jumping to conclusions. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was horribly wrong. I slammed my foot on the gas pedal, desperate to outrun this other truck, this other version of me. But no matter how fast I went, it stayed right behind me. Was I losing my mind? Was this some kind of hallucination? I glanced back in the mirror again. The truck was still there, but now I saw it slowly start to pull ahead. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. The truck sped up, coming closer and closer until it was almost level with mine. I looked over at the driver, the other me. He was smiling. It wasn't a normal smile. It was like he was something else, something sinister, something that shouldn't be there. I felt my stomach churn, my skin crawling as I watched that smile stretch unnaturally, widening until it almost seemed to take up his whole face. I couldn't take it anymore. I floored the accelerator, pushing the truck faster than I thought it could go. But no matter how fast I went, he was still there just behind me in that other truck smiling. And then, just as suddenly as it started, the truck behind me disappeared. One moment I could see it in the mirror, and the next, nothing. The road was empty again. I didn't stop to check, I didn't want to, I just kept driving, faster and faster, my heart still pounding in my chest. It wasn't until I reached the next truck stop, hours later, that I allowed myself to breathe again. I checked my mirrors every few minutes the entire time I was there, just to make sure I wasn't being followed. But there was nothing. No other truck. No other me. I parked my rig at the far end of the lot, away from the bright truck stop lights, but close enough that I could still see everything around me. My hands were shaking as I shut off the engine. I sat there for a long time, gripping the wheel, listening to the soft rumble of idling engines from other trucks. Normal trucks. Real ones. Finally, I convinced myself to step out. The night air was cool, but I was sweating. I walked around my truck, checking the tires, the trailer, anything to ground myself in reality. Maybe I'd just been overtired. Maybe it really was some kind of hallucination. To this day, I'm not sure. It felt so real. It started as a harmless camping trip. 4 of us packed into a single car with tents and supplies heading deep into a national park. The place had a reputation, old stories about strange sounds, people disappearing, and a few claims about creatures that shouldn't exist. But we didn't take any of that seriously. We just wanted a weekend away enjoying each other's company. The first night went by without a hitch. We set up camp in a small clearing, roasted marshmallows over the fire, and told ghost stories to freak each other out. Nothing unusual. It was on the second night that things got strange. We were sitting around the fire again, laughing and joking when we all heard it. A voice. It came from somewhere in the trees, faint but unmistakable. It said, "Hey, come here," in this cheerful tone. At first, we thought it was just some hikers passing by, but then we realized the voice sounded exactly like Jason's. Jason, who was sitting right there with us. "What the hell?" Mark said, looking around. Did you guys hear that?" We all nodded. Jason laughed nervously. "It sounded like me," he said, glancing into the dark beyond the fire. "That's weird." "Yeah, weird," I said. My stomach was already twisting with unease. "It's probably an echo or something," Rachel suggested, though she didn't sound convinced. That's when it came again. "Hey, come here." The voice was clearer and closer. Jason stood up, his face turned pale. "Okay, that's not funny," he said, looking at the rest of us. "Who's messing with me?" "None of us," Mark said. He looked dead serious. "We're all right here." In that moment, I wasn't sure if Rachel and Mark were playing a prank on Jason and me, but I got suspicious, even though they seemed to genuinely be as confused and worried as Jason and myself. "Let's check it out," Jason said, grabbing a flashlight. "Are you serious?" "What if it's someone messing with us, or worse?" Rachel asked. "Then we'll tell them to leave us alone," Jason said. I'm not just gonna sit here while some weirdo keeps calling me out. Against my better judgment, we all followed him. Jason led the way. Mark and Rachel walked behind him while I took up the rear, glancing over my shoulder every few seconds. The voice called out again, leading us deeper into the forest. It was uncanny. It sounded exactly like Jason, but there was something off about it, like it was too cheerful, too forced. As we pushed further into the woods, the air grew colder. I was about to suggest that we should head back, but then Jason whispered, "Do you guys see that?" Up ahead, maybe 60 feet away, stood a figure. It was hard to make out in the dim light, but as we got closer, the flashlight beam revealed more of its face. It was Jason, or something that looked exactly like him. It stood perfectly still, staring at us. Its features were identical to Jason's, down to the clothes he was wearing. "What the hell is that?" Mark whispered, stepping back. I don't know," Jason stammered. The thing tilted its head. Then, without warning, it started running toward us. It moved fast. "Run!" I shouted, grabbing Rachel's arm. We turned and bolted back the way we'd come. Behind us, I could hear the sound of heavy, uneven footsteps hitting the ground. It was following us. "Don't look back," Jason shouted. But I couldn't help myself. I glanced over my shoulder and saw it. The thing that looked like Jason was still chasing us. We didn't stop running until we reached the campsite. Jason and Mark immediately started searching for the firearm Jason brought with him, but the figure seemed to have stopped its chase. "Did you see its eyes?" Rachel said with tears in her eyes. I tried to calm her down, telling her that we were safe now. I wasn't just saying that to make her feel better. I genuinely felt safe now that Jason had his firearm ready. We agreed that we should get out of there. We packed up our stuff in a hurry, always keeping an eye over our shoulder for that thing. When we were done packing, we walked back towards our car, clutching each other so that no one suddenly would be pulled away like you always see in horror movies. We made it out safely and agreed to never return to that national park ever again.